Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say we can get started. And then if anybody really, really wants to hear my introduction at the beginning, they can listen to the recording that we'll send out at the end. All right, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for our TMC Connect session, How to Build a Strong Corporate Communication Strategy. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a slide here for you all so that you can see that you are indeed in the correct webinar. Ta-da! If this is what you signed up for, then congratulations, you made it, and I'm proud of you. So I wanted to kind of bring everybody through a couple of housekeeping things. Everybody is muted for the duration of the call except for the panelists, just to make sure that we don't have a lot of background noise going on and you can hear all the great tidbits. But if you do have any questions that you want to ask, please feel free to drop it in the chat function, which is at the very bottom of your screen in your Zoom power board. And this session is a part of our TMC Connect call. If you've been anywhere near LinkedIn for the past like 2 months, you know all about TMC Connect, our educational networking platform. Other exclusive member benefits are Ask TMC, which is one of our messaging forums because we want to keep people connected in between our in-person events. And then TMC Benchmark, which is our real-time data platform in which you can see how you compare to your competitors on a month-to-month basis. We have some awesome discussion leaders with us today. We have Sarah Gonzalez, the Chief Operating Officer for First Guarantee Mortgage Corporation. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We also have her right-hand lady, the SVP of Marketing for First Guarantee Mortgage Corporation, Brittany Whitmire. Brittany, thank you so much for taking the time with us. And then we are also joined by Craig Ungaro, the Chief Operating Officer for Annie Mac Home Mortgage. Craig, thank you for being here.
Of course, my pleasure.
I love all these like little sup nods and like, yeah.
I was just following Sarah's lead there, yeah.
Too cool for school. Like, yes, yeah, I understand, I am a big deal. And then last but certainly not least, we are joined by Casey Brinkert. I hope I pronounced it right, Casey.
Yes.
The VP of Marketing for Annie Mac Home Mortgage. Casey, I know you were a super last minute ad, but we're really, really happy to have you here with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be part of it.
All right. So I'm going to stop that share so that we can see everybody's beautiful faces. And we're going to go ahead and just jump straight in to the meat of it all. All right. So Sarah and Craig, we are going to ask you guys a couple of questions and then we're going to bounce a couple off of Casey and Brittany. So for Sarah and Craig, please, can you speak a little bit to your COVID strategy? Because we know everything changed over the course of a couple of months ago. And we want to know, what did your new communication strategy look like? How did it change in response to the ever-changing environment, this roller coaster ride that we've been going on over the past few months? And then what did you learn from it? Happy to repeat any of those too. Sarah, if you want to start with us.
Oh, thank you. So if I can just take a step back pre-COVID, I think, our communication strategy was really based on some of the primary things that most companies do today, right? So email, internal templates, all hands calls, business review meetings, things of that nature. But as COVID kind of came to light, we started really thinking about kind of in early March, how we were going to kind of revise our communication strategy based off the information we were getting from a number of sources like the CDC, and other different, the World Health Organization, things of that nature. How were we going to keep employees informed with not only what was going on the outside of our organization, but then how we were going to handle it internally. So from just a pure just communication perspective, with regards to just email, we kind of dumped the ad hoc piece and we actually put together a daily COVID communication. Those daily updates were really focused on a number of different things. Our transition to work from home was on there. We used it for a lot of video platforming, so executives or managers being able to see us on video, us making sure that the health and well-being of our employees was well. We also put together, or I should say Brittany's group put together a COVID page on our intranet site where not only where those communications could go and people could search or look back on past communications, but also just have the resources available there for anything that they may need. Those resources were medical in nature, employee assistance programs, CDC guidelines, World Health Organization guidelines, things of that nature. And then, of course, we talked a little bit about market changes. We'd have our CEO and kind of give a State of the Union. That almost happened, if not on a weekly basis, every other week. And then finally, we tried to keep it fun. COVID was it's not fun. It's still not fun. And we really tried to use, that platform of communication to get people excited about keeping them connected with not only us from an executive standpoint, but also their peer groups. We did a lot of, pick submissions around who their new coworkers were. So we had, lots of cats and dogs and things of that nature. Sometimes a kid. I didn't see any significant others, but there was a call to action to submit those. So, we certainly tried to, make it fun. Social media, we created a hashtag called Maverick Strong. We're still using that today, but really the point of that hashtag is to really focus on how we are pioneering through COVID. We're all, one group trying to hold each other together. And then, last couple things I would say is, we really tried to, we have a recognition platform in our intranet, but we really tried to kind of take the base definition of those, rewards and kind of tie them to communication. So promoting the behavior that we want as far as how people are communicating. And people like that, right? It's out on the internet. People can see it. People can like each other's comments and badges. And then lastly, which I spoke to a little bit of earlier, was just polling, right? Trying to get a temperature check from the employee base, some of which were serious topics, others that are fun. Like I think the current one today is what cuisine you like best, and you get like 4 choices. So again, just trying to keep a mix of seriousness and making sure we're getting information out as soon as possible, but also to trying to keep it fun and interesting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I personally loved seeing through everyone's different social media platforms just the slew of dog pictures and cat pictures and baby pictures, anything that it took people to kind of help them cope through all of the stuff with COVID. And I know that you said that you are keeping it, like at the very least, you're keeping the Maverick Strong hashtag, but are there other elements to this new strategy you had to adopt that are going to stay?
I mean, just the cadence of those communications as things started to wind down a little bit, and you start seeing yourself repeating the same message over and over and over again, you're going to lose your audience, right? You want when that template pops up, you want employees to read it. You want them to be interested in what you're talking about. So as we kind of saw things start to somewhat start normalizing, we didn't go back to the ad hoc strategy we were doing before, but we're now doing it 3 times a week. We also updated the template. It doesn't say COVID specific now. It's just called a corporate communication. And it's released 3 times a week. And then, of course, we maintain our one-on-ones, team meetings, team huddles, business reviews, all hands calls, things of that nature. But I would say that we have not really stopped the conversation around COVID, because now the next topic is when are we returning to work, right? So getting organized for that, getting people prepared for that, and still having those conversations.
Oh, that's awesome. And Craig, we wanted to ask you from the same question, but from Annie Mac's perspective, did your communication style have to change and drastically in any way once everything got kind of thrown out the window?
Yeah, we actually had to grow up overnight. And I say that because, going into 2020, we kind of owned the fact that at the executive level that our communication was poor and that we needed to improve on it. We tried to put a communication strategy in place. How would we do it? What would be the cadence? Would it be once a month? What are the talking points? And, January came and went. And then February, there was some travel. And then, we didn't do it the first 2 months. So we had a goal in the beginning of the year to do 12 of these, one every single month. And, we were overthinking it and probably overcomplicating the whole all company call and what are we going to talk about and all that. And then COVID hit. And we had to make a decision to work from home in 24 hours. And we were able to do that. And that was great, but it was a shock. Like everybody's like, okay, now we're at home. What do we do? And so we needed to communicate frequently. So I think the first week we were doing it almost daily, where at least one executive was giving some sort of mass communication. But what we settled in on was an all company call on Fridays. So for our organization, we've done some town halls in the past, but there was no consistency to it. It wasn't even quarterly. If it was twice a year, that would probably be a lot. And generally it would be in response to something, it was never, wasn't as planned as it should be. So we decided to do a weekly call, and that worked out to be great. We had just recently, Memorial Day, the Friday before Memorial Day was the first Friday we didn't do an all company call. And since then we've been going every other week. And the feedback has been great. It's definitely something our staff probably really wanted for a while. Like I said, COVID kind of made us grow up overnight. And, it would be in our executive team, there's 4 of us. There's our CEO who owns the company, our CFO, myself, and our chief production officer. I think a lot of people at TMC know Ryan Cuby. The 4 of us would get on every Friday, or we do get on every Friday, and we touch on different topics. So my CEO will talk about things. He's a former Wall Street guy, but if you talk to him, you feel like he's an economist. He'll put you right to sleep. No, I'm kidding. I mean, he's a very intelligent guy. But he'll talk about sort of the environment that we're operating in, right? There's sort of our macroeconomic environment as a mortgage company, how it relates to us. A lot of people see headlines at the beginning of the stock market was crashing, rates, there was all these conversations. So he would bring all of those conversations to the employee level. He did a great job of explaining on that. On our CFO, he also oversees our HR. So there was a lot of stuff with Teledoc. There was a lot of communication where he was doing a great job of relating the event to, the pandemic to our staff and how we could be there for them. We have a sunshine fund that we put together several years ago. And so we were reminding people that we had that a sunshine fund is actually a fund that we raise for our own employees in the event that somebody has a hardship. So he was, sort of connecting that as well. If fortunately we're all employed, but if somebody in your household is not employed, please come to us. We people were going through a lot during that time. So he did a really good job of doing that. And then as like the PPP came in and he was sort of explaining personal benefits to some of the CARES Act and legislation that was passing. Myself, I just was there for a little humor. I just made people laugh. No, I would talk about the work from home because part of my role is to oversee the technology side of it. And then I would recap all credit policy that would take place for that week. So we couldn't wait till Friday to tell people what changes were happening because people were, non-QM providers out, jumbo out, warehouse lines were changing this, investors, everybody was reacting. It was going so fast. There really wasn't a great way to communicate at that time. And so it was just email communication after email communication. Unfortunately, we had a forum for credit policy changes. So they would just come out more frequently than ever. So we would spend a lot of time on that Friday going through each one of those to make sure everybody understood what was happening and why. There's always questions from our staff like, well, are the investors doing this? Like, who's making us do this? There's always, you need to give an explanation on our way of managing the risk that we saw at that time. And so there was no better way for us to sort of connect with our employees directly. That did turn into our Q&As became guideline questions. And I did that for a couple of weeks until I found that I botched one of the guideline questions. So we created a spin-off from that weekly meeting to a weekly credit policy meeting that happens every Tuesday. And that still happens every Tuesday. And it really gives our fulfillment folks and production folks an opportunity to get on a call just on what's changing, and answer any questions that they may have. And we learn a lot from our employees by doing that. And then our chief production officer operated as sort of a moderator. He did the Q&As, and he did a great job of recognition. I think, Sarah, you talked about this a little bit. You know, so many people were doing such amazing things. I mean, it was such an odd time, still is an odd time, right? It's like, you know, at one point, you know, there were so many changes. It was like, how are we doing business anymore? Yet we had more business than ever. So some employees were breaking records from a productivity standpoint. So, you know, we're kind of like, here are all these risks, and this is why we're not doing this. And by the way, more loans than ever before, you know, and it was, you know, he did a really good job of balancing that. So we also have our employee recognition program. It's called Anagram. So it's where one employee can recognize another employee. It doesn't have to be a top-down thing. And those go out every day whenever they come across our desk. It's actually run through Casey's department. And we also took this opportunity to sort of speak to those anagrams. And I think that was very motivating for our employees to get that recognition during that time as well. So really tried to balance it as best as we could. We had the real-time changes, and then we really had the recap meetings every Friday. And those, I think we will definitely keep those. And I think all the executives now know how to do it. We feel much more comfortable doing it, not overthinking it, and it'll be sort of the way we do business as we go forward.
No, that's awesome. I love the idea of the employee recognition program that you have. Anagrams, also the name makes me smile. But when you were saying that you couldn't even wait until Friday to give them a weekly update because something would happen on Wednesday and then a different thing would happen on Thursday, and like you can't wait to, you know, then fend off everybody's questions all at once, that I wonder, I hope, I knock on wood, like 2020 has been a little rough so far. Like we're making it, it's all good. But that I wonder when we're going to be faced with another time like this in which we're going to have to be giving like on the minute updates as things are coming in. And that's really great too, to hear from both of you guys how much the executive teams worked to make sure that everybody on the ground level knew what was going on. So that's good. I commend both of you guys for that.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure Craig will agree with me here. Cute little boy.
Sorry about that. I heard something fall down there. My wife's outside, so he came in. He'll be all right. He'll shake it off. Rub some dirt on it.
I'm sure our raging 4-year-old will come in here in a little bit. Now, what I was going to say is, you know, I know we're talking about communication strategy here today, but I think through the entire COVID period, and I don't want to stray away from this topic, but the ability for your organization to be nimble, to be able to make decisions on the fly, execute them immediately, communicate them to your staff, and inspect what you expect from those changes is, you know, uber important. So whether we're talking about communication or anything else, the lesson learned for I know for myself, and Craig, I'm sure for you guys, is the ability to be nimble through changes like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we grew so much as a group. You know, the best thing that came out of this is, you know, I would say as a group, we would sit on decisions for a little too long. Like I said, about this is the silliest thing, even just the way we communicated, we overthought it, and we didn't have that luxury. And what it did was it really elevated us as a team, not just the executive team, but our senior leadership team, that we had to make decisions, we had to be nimble. And I do think we probably grew. I mean, I know 2020 is not even halfway done, but we probably grew like 3 years this year so far. And it's been really amazing and blessed to be here still. Our company's doing great. But yeah, it's been quite a ride.
That's awesome. Thank you both for sharing what your experiences in that have been. And now we're going to loop in Casey and Brittany. Are you guys ready? I want to ask you guys about what some of the best practices are to building a strong communication plan or strategy. So Brittany, if you don't mind, we can start with you. You're on mute, Brittany, I think. Yes. You look like you were really charging up to say something important, so I didn't want you to get too far into it. It says your phone is on mute. No, I still can't hear you. Wait, I know.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I had a few things I jotted down for this this question, Gabby. So I think the most important thing is you start with your end goal. So figure out your objectives and really ask yourself, and we've asked ourselves in defining our communication strategy, what do we want to accomplish from this? What is our primary goal? And, for us, a big part of our communication strategy, I know Sarah spoke to this, was employee culture. So, we wanted to make sure that we could instill trust in our employees. We had that transparency that was being communicated from the top down. So, for us, when we were looking at an overall strategy, we really kind of started with the end and then worked our way back. Another thing is, for us, and people may disagree with this, but developing a voice, a brand, right? So having like maybe one person who is owning communications, and for us, we have a dedicated role for that, so that all of your communications appear consistent, the voice, your brand sounds the same, and somebody can easily look at your communications, external and internal, over time and say, that's FGMC, that is clearly on brand, that's their voice. So I think that's definitely a best practice I've picked up since I started my role at FGMC. The other thing I would say is follow up. So define when you're going to follow up, set that expectation, and meet it. And even if you don't necessarily have an update, communicate that and say, hey, we don't have an update right now, but we just wanted to check in and let you guys know that we're following up and we're going to touch base again in a week or something like that. So I think that's been really, really important through all of the COVID stuff, because people have had a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear around, is my job safe, what's going on? So, really having that clear, defined follow-up, I think is huge. And then, Sarah touched on this, and I think Craig did too, but have a sense of urgency. So, with some communications, especially with all of the stuff that's been happening with COVID, we didn't have time to make the template look perfect or the graphics look pretty. We just had to get the message out quickly and then adjust after the fact. So I think just having that sense of urgency in communication, especially ones that are time sensitive, is huge. And just my last one is be repetitive. So I feel like, that you want your communications to be intriguing and engaging, but I feel like you also have to be repetitive, because in my experience, people don't get it the first time. Sometimes it takes 4 or 5 different reinforcement messages for people to, really look up and pay attention. So for us, what we do is, we'll have a mention on an all hands call, an email, we'll have a post on our intranet platform, something on social media. I mean, really trying to hit a particular message, especially if it's important, from different avenues and mediums. So I would say definitely being repetitive with critical company communications is huge.
No, that's extremely helpful. I know even we only have like a team of like 10 people that are, currently working on stuff in TMC, and it's still, they're all doing so many different things. It really helps to have something be like, hey, I don't know if you guys saw this, but this is important. Tune in for more. So thank you for sharing. And then Casey, the same question for you. Do you have any other best practices on how to build a strong communication plan or strategy, especially maybe for someone who hasn't had one previously?
Yeah, I think establishing your audience and knowing who you're speaking to first, and then also identifying the purpose of the communication is important. As Brittany stated, kind of starting from the end goal, what is the purpose of this communication, and who that audience is. I also think that determining the channel in which you're going to communicate in is important. There are some people who respond to text messages. There's some people who respond to video. There are other people who respond to email. So defining that channel will obviously get that communication across more effectively. And I also believe, as Craig mentioned, him being the humor on our all company call, I think you need to add humor where you can, obviously, if the communication is appropriate. But I think that definitely humanizes that communication going out to the employees. I know a lot of times employees might feel that C-level executives can be unapproachable at times, but I think if you're acting real and you're adding a little humor where you can, I think it makes them more approachable.
Yeah. It's not even about humanizing. It's not just about humanizing yourself to people externally and making people see your organization as a group of people trying to get a job done. It's humanizing the higher up positions to your staff and making them feel comfortable to talk with you and know that there's an open line in case they need anything.
Absolutely. I think they're more inclined to be open and feel that they can be more open if you act real during your communications.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know from our end, we've been trying to add in more just like little fun tidbits to both our communications internally and externally. I've gotten into a habit of trying to find like song references to make within like our emails to maybe make people like a tiny bit more likely to read a little further. So I feel that. Yeah. Thank you. And this is another question for Casey and Brittany. What are some of the ways that you found the most effective? Casey, I know you're talking about like defining your channel and determining what you're going to use to deliver communications. Can you share if there's any like tools or programs that you use for internal communications versus external communications?
Yeah, so it's funny because a lot of the communications that we use externally for our borrowers or our realtor partners, we also use internally. Right now, one of the biggest things is Microsoft Teams. We work through that system, doing a lot of our video conferencing. Of course, when it's an all company call and you have 1,000 employees or 600 employees attending, you need a larger platform, but so we'll use GoToMeeting. But I definitely think video conferencing is an effective way to communicate. I think it's more face-to-face. You can see the other person who's talking to you. So, I mean, we use different, we have a system called Co-Video where you can record videos and send videos out. We do communicate internally to our employees that way as well, occasionally with updates that aren't necessarily as important on an all company call.
And what's that called?
Co-Video.
Co-Video? I'm writing notes. Okay, see me look down a lot. I'm paying attention to you. I'm also just writing things down because this is great. Oh, but that's awesome. And I've also heard of Boom Boom. I hope I said that right, so it doesn't sound stupid.
Very similar to Co-Video.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's something that I've been looking into and seeing if that's something we can incorporate into our email correspondences out and then also stuff internally. But yeah, God bless Zoom for having to, and all the other video conferencing stuff for having to step up. My husband had never heard of Zoom and he's like, why is everyone talking about it? I'm like, because it's our only way to see each other.
Only way to communicate these days.
Yeah, that's just the cool way to do it.
Absolutely.
And Brittany, did you have any suggestions for tools that your team uses both internally and externally?
You know, I think Casey covered it really well. We do have like an intranet platform. I think Sarah talked about that before, and we call that Block Party. So we've really focused on making that that platform not just a resource hub, but a like almost internal social media platform. So we've got a lot of interaction ability with our pulse checks, which are like quick little polls that, again, Sarah mentioned earlier. We have the recognition badges where people can kind of give the kudos and it goes on that person's feed. So, you know, I think that's been huge for us. to, especially with people remote, to kind of pull them back to one centralized place to find resources, but also communicate and interact with each other. So I would add that one for us.
That's awesome. I can't even fathom like trying to set that up. Media.
Somebody smarter than me on my team, who's my digital marketing manager. She did a fantastic job. So, and then it requires maintenance, right? So you can't just like create a platform. And I've been a part of organizations who kind of set something up and left it. Like it requires investment and upkeep to make sure that you're showing the most relevant articles to the people who are engaging, that you're always trying to, develop new content and keep people coming back. So it's definitely important to us. So we prioritize that, pretty high on our list of projects.
No, that's wonderful. And Brittany, I know that you and Sarah have both mentioned polling a couple of times. That kind of ties into the next question that I had, was about a temperature check for your communication strategy. Like, how do you know when it's working and not working? And then, so I'll go with Brittany first, and then we'll turn it over to Casey.
Yeah, so for us, I think having the polls in place, just to get those quick temperature checks. And then also we do like employee engagement surveys, more intense employee engagement surveys. I think you can't just do the surveys. You have to go back and take the results, understand, okay, in certain areas, and even as simple as the pulse checks, if we have, 45% and 45%, and we've got a very split, response pool, and we think it's a very straightforward question around, how comfortable or how, involved have you been in communications, then clearly something's wrong, right? So we may think that we're communicating effectively and giving, our employees what they need in terms of communication, but until you complete that feedback loop and really hear from everyone else how they're feeling about things, take those survey results and put it into an actionable, hey, something's clearly off here, we scored way low, or we're doing really well here, we scored really high. So I think having kind of the numbers behind that. I also, just kind of a little bit of a gut check, sometimes just reaching out to random employees in the company if we have an initiative going on, say, hey, what do you think about this? And if they don't know what I'm talking about, then something's broken, right? We need to go back and revisit the communication. So, kind of going to that lowest common denominator of every single employee, line level all the way up to C-suite for our really important strategic initiatives should be on the same page. And if we're not, then we need to try kind of circle back and go at it from a different angle. So, that's not exactly the data, the database way, but I think that's just kind of a good gut check that I use to see, are people really getting the information that we're pushing out, and is it trickling all the way down?
No, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And something you said that really, really stuck out to me is you can't just survey people, you have to actually look at the results and determine something from it. I've been guilty of that in the past, of being like, well, we surveyed them. Be like, wait, how closely did I actually look at that? So
yeah,
that we're trying to get better
and
at.
I think that's with any numbers, right? Any reporting, you're like, okay, I have the numbers, like, good for me, pat on the back, but it's really like what you do with them and how you define your initiatives and, hey, we want to change this or implement this. And our learning and development team actually owns some of those employee engagement surveys. So in marketing, we work really closely with HR and the learning team to figure out, how we can define an actionable plan from some of those results. So, it's not just marketing, it's not just HR, it's got to be, I think, a collaborative effort amongst multiple departments.
Absolutely.
Brittany, who do you use for your poll survey and your polls and your survey? What system do you use?
Yeah, so for the polls, the platform that we have for our intranet, it's just a widget that comes with it. So that platform is Communifier. It's a surefire product that you can kind of pull in these different widgets, and a polling widget is one of those. We also have used for our surveys SurveyMonkey, JotForm. So I think for our engagement surveys, we're currently using SurveyMonkey, and we use that for our external customer surveys as well. So we've been pretty happy so far with that platform.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. And Casey, I know that we covered a lot in the way of like polling and like what Brittany said about having like a gut feeling, just kind of having an idea that something's off in the way that people are receiving information. Do you have anything to add to how maybe you guys at Andy Mac have been taking the temperature and deciding whether or not your communication plan is working?
Yeah, as Brittany stated, I definitely think polling is important. We actually take a lot of surveys to try to get a pulse on our employees. They're typically through third parties so that our employees feel more comfortable with being open and honest. And then once those are completed, we'll get the reporting surveys. It just, if they know it's anonymous, then they're more inclined to be honest about it versus, if someone potentially knows that employee or who filled out that survey, they're much more hesitant. We also have a wellness committee and a culture committee. So the culture committee really works on cultural initiatives, whether it's charity type things, how we can keep the culture going. So while we've been in COVID, we've done online bingo on Friday nights. We did a spirit, everyone wear your Annie Mac gear and post your photos to social media, and they can potentially win a gift certificate. So we do a silver lining. So we're trying to do things to keep the employees engaged as well. It can get lonely working from home. So it's nice to have those additional activities. And the wellness committee, they've been doing online yoga sessions, meditation sessions. So there's a lot of different areas where we get a lot of feedback and what the employees are looking for and what they're in need of during this time. And I think like Brittany said, it's extremely important to try to get that feedback. And I think the more open you are with your employees, the more inclined they're going to be open to you and really give you honest feedback.
Yeah.
I think those are really good examples, Casey. The committees are run by employees. It's not like you can only have so many from a certain area. It's really a volunteer basis. So it gets whatever traction the employees really want. So if you're doing those committees, you have to be very authentic. You have to give the control back to your employees and let them run it. And I think you get feedback within that, within those committees. Wellness committee and culture committee for us have been very successful. The other place that we do it, our change management process includes the leadership advisory teams. So for example, we have, I think it's very common for organizations to have a sales leadership advisory team, but we try to get our managers to have a small subgroup of, I would say, a combination of some employees they would like to bounce things off of before we go out with it. And this is very common in process flow changes, workflow changes, or any sort of guideline changes that obviously, if they're mandatory, they have to happen. But definitely want to get some eyes on some things before they go out to the masses. And that sort of, we had to do away with that during COVID because things were just changing very fast. And we didn't have time to kind of have like a communication loop with a small group of people. But in a normal environment, that has been very helpful. It's another way for you to solicit feedback and really anticipate what changes might do to somebody. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but let's just say we're making a change to something within the workflow, within the process, and it's going to infect the processors. We would bring a core group of 5, 6, maybe 7 processors together and explain to them exactly what we're going to do. And in that moment, we're going to get 5 or 6, 7 different opinions, which is going to enlighten our management team, the sort of the change agents of our organization. And so the next time around, we're still going to do the same thing. We're going to ask them their opinion, but we've already now have a little bit of experience, a little bit of perspective from that we would never had before, and sort of anticipate that a little bit. So that goes a little bit smoother, but just the fact, even if it's, yep, that's great. I like the way it is. It's fine. I understand. You get buy-in then when the change happens. Now you have a couple of your core people that are like, yep, I understand why it's happening. I got sort of an explanation, and there's no complaining about it. There's really less resistance to it. And that also really helps. And again, you're soliciting feedback from employees in a different ways, in addition to the more traditional ways like surveys and things like that.
Oh, that's a great thing to consider too. I think that would really only work for organizations that have a lot of employees. I can't see how, if you have a smaller one, maybe like TMC, that only has like 10 people, like that's just called like a meeting where we ask everybody how they're feeling of the entire core team. But I appreciate that. And that might be good insight for somebody who has more people to draw off of, and therefore more people to please. We are coming close on time. We have about 5 minutes left, and I want to keep it relatively close to that. So if I'd like to bundle it up with getting an idea of what the new normal for corporate communications is going to look like, and just a couple of sentences from everybody. So we'll start from more of like the executive level with Sarah, because we haven't heard from you in a little while. What's a new normal look like?
I think I kind of explained that in the beginning portion of the seminar here today, but I can tell you for sure why it's important to have the strategy, and I think, you know, myself included or FGMC included, you know, you really saw the impact of what communication can do for a company. I know I looked up a couple of stats. There's a book called Cost of Poor Communication. It's written by David Grossman, but he estimates that companies lose up to $420,000 a year per 100 employees for bad communication strategies. Now, define bad communication, you know, is what I have good and somebody else has bad. But I think when you look at the numbers and see the impacts on your employees, you have to ask yourself, you know, is what I'm doing accretive in nature? You know, am I serving my employee correctly? Because all of this starts with culture, right? And all of us, I'm sure, have committees and things of that nature in our own brand, and how, you know, what those mission statements are and all of that. But you have a brand, right? And you got to live through that brand from a communication standpoint. I think I heard Casey say this earlier. Employees want you to keep it real. They don't want you to, you know, shoot the crap and, you know, tell them one thing to their face and do something else behind their back. They're looking for transparency. Now, from an executive standpoint, I know we can't always be super transparent, but in the instances where you can, you should. I think, you know, we as an organization, and Brittany, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but we eliminated a lot of rumors and assumptions by having the communication out front of everyone, and you know, not leaving any kind of gap for there to be guessing per se. You know, I think, again, some other folks on the phone said, don't just tell them what's happening, but tell them why. You know, this gives the employee the empowerment and motivation to move quickly on the message. I think, you know, there's that age-old rule of 50 times, right? Somebody doesn't learn something unless they've been told 50 times how to do it. I can't remember who else mentioned that. It was either Brittany or Casey, maybe it was both, but I think that's very relevant. So, you know, to the point earlier, you say something in one medium, you probably need to repeat it in multiple mediums, especially if it's something that is, you know, credit policy related, pricing related, product, you know, pausing or product, you know, releases, whatever they may be. And, you know, we talked about feedback and how important that is, and consistency of the message from the top down. So, you know, as far as my new normal at FGMC, it's make a strategy and continue to keep a strategy that kind of hits on all those bullet points that I just went through.
Yeah. Yeah, and Craig, do you have anything that you would want to add to that, and what things look like now, and why you should have something set up?
Sure. Yeah, I'll touch it from a different angle, because I think that those were all really great points. I don't want to reiterate any of those points, but I would say that you know, video conferencing is something we didn't do before, and you know, about 70% of our employee base is remote. So I would say, if something that we're going to do ongoing, you know, keeping it real and being transparent, you know, by taking body language out of the equation completely, I mean, we've been operating without that with almost a majority of our employees for years. And now by force, we do this on a regular basis. And I think that's the one thing, and it's not just the executive team. I'm very comfortable to do this, and so are the 3 other executives in our organization, but it's all of our managers treating all of our employees, looking them in the eyes when they're giving them information, and making sure they get it. It doesn't have to be always just bad news either. It doesn't have to be always, change, but just relating to our employees. And, I think that's probably the number one takeaway, or the thing I'm most excited about when we get back to normal. And the one thing I'll be most focused on to not, that's not normal. This is going to be normal from here on out. And this is the thing we're going to consistently do. So it might be on a different scale, but I think it's really worth mentioning. And I don't think we should underestimate the value in a face-to-face conversation, regardless of where your employee sits.
Oh, thank you. And Casey or Brittany, do you guys have anything to add as to what what the new normal would be, or even just kind of some final remarks based from the marketing leader perspective?
Yeah, so I think the bar has been set. So I think that moving forward, we're going to see a high bar for communications. People want transparency, they want authenticity and genuine, communications, and they want it frequently. So I think all of this is going to bring about a kind of that higher bar for corporate communications internally and externally, that it needs to be met moving forward. And I think as a result of that, previously kind of corporate communications or communications in general sometimes was the last bullet on the marketing strategy checklist. It's okay, we did all these other things, this is the lowest priority for a lot of companies. I think we're going to see that shift to the top, and be one of the highest priorities that companies look at in terms of their strategic initiatives.
Oh, that's a great point. I think you're right. That's going to be the new thing that people start to prioritize, and I'm glad for it. That's one of the good things of all of this craziness. Casey, is there anything that you wanted to add?
I agree with everyone here. One of the things I recall when I was working in the office is hundreds and hundreds of emails every day. And what I've noticed now working from home, everyone's more eager to get on a video or video conferencing or get on the phone to speak to someone. So kind of similar to what Craig had mentioned, actually appreciating that and maybe cutting back on the email and actually talking to someone, picking up the phone. We've all gotten so used to technology that we've, to some extent, gotten a little lazy, and it's easier to send an email than to pick up a phone and talk to someone. It's easier to text someone versus picking up the phone and calling them. So I think with this stay at home, we're all learning to appreciate that a little bit more.
Yeah. Amen to that. I agree with, I'm not going to add anything. I agree to everything you guys just said. I thought it was fabulous. And the last thing that we wanted to leave everybody with is that we were struggling. We're like, wouldn't it be great if there was an acronym or something short and kind of zippy that we could share? And the thing that we had come up with was ICON. And so your content has to be intriguing. It has to really capture people, and they have to be willing to go back and read through it and actually take the time to read your correspondences that you have taken the time to so meticulously put out. But you have to make it interesting enough for them to want to. It should be consistent. So we mentioned a lot about, the cadence of your communication, how often it goes out, where you're putting it out, what the expectations are. If somebody wants to find this bit of information, where should they go? It should be open. It should be open communication. Develop a path for feedback. We had some great advice on polling and those groups that you can gather up and ask them of what their opinions are. Likes and comments, Q&A. You want to make sure that people feel comfortable giving you feedback. So whatever way you need to do that, do it. And then being nimble. So I think that the entire mortgage industry, really being new to it myself, was really cool to see how quickly an entire industry could just spin on its head when something crazy happened like COVID. And it's always going to change. And I think that that's a strength of this industry in particular. And it's just something we have to continue to hone in on and know that you have to, you're never the best at it. You could always get better. But I don't see any other questions coming up within our chat box. But if anybody does have any other questions, feel free to reach out. We hope to see you on our next TMC Connect calls. And thank you all so much to all of the participants for taking the time to tune in today, and to all of the speakers, especially those who's maybe their first time on a webinar, for joining us today and sharing those insights. Otherwise, I hope to hear from you guys soon. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.